You're listening to the 4-Phase Cycle Podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of ZESTY Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the 4 phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hello, it is Alex, and I am here to do day 21 of our Flowing With Your Cycle series. Bam, I can't believe we're at phase 4 already. These started as an idea for me to do some super short episodes and check out what has happened. This has been cooler and more gratifying for me to do than I was anticipating, because as I thought about these concepts, I realized just how far-reaching their implications are and how much of an impact it has had. And it literally just kind of even gets me emotional a little bit when I think about the things that can help us physically with our symptoms, that get the body on board in a healthy way, help us create hormones well, help us get out of symptom land, really give us control over our life. When you add that, plus then the application of what is true for your body into the application of what is good for your emotional well-being, your mental well-being, your spiritual well-being, it's even more powerful, right? Because we have this notion of there's my body and my health, and then there's my life. And then sometimes we even split it up further. It's like, well, I have my job over here and my relationship over here. And here's my business over here and my motherhood over here. And the reason we love this saying, how you do one thing is how you do everything, is that it's such a 2x4 to the face sometimes to realize that we are who we are in all of those aspects. So even when we artificially trying to chunk it up and kind of say, this is me and this is me here, you are you no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. And so as we begin to transcend, how do I eat for my hormone health? How do I move for my hormone health? What supplement do I take? All super important things, and certainly we don't skip doing that stuff. But the discussions that we're having in these episodes, they really light me up, because these are the things that make all of the food, all of the movement, all of the supplements really work, because now our brain and our spirit and our emotions are all congruently on the same page. We are being who we want to be at the highest level. When we be our best selves make better decisions than the people that got us here right now. And there's not a shame to that. We are always going to evolve and then look back and say, wow, I wish I had known that. Just like in second grade, you weren't a bad second grader, but by your senior year in high school, you knew more than your second grader self did. So this is not to say that with shame about where we are, but as we begin to step into that, there's so much more perspective available to us. And one analogy that really helps me is when you are by, Rockefeller Center, and it's a big, tall building, or pick any other. Let's do Willis Tower, although I'm of the age where it's the Sears Tower in Chicago or bust. But whatever, I guess we're calling, I think it's even called something else. Anyways, not important. Really tall building. When you're standing next to the Sears Tower, sorry, bear with me, I'm just going to go with that name. You can see the street. You can see down the street. You can see the crosswalk. You can see generally around you, but that's all that you see. And if someone says, "Where are you?" you're going to be like, "I'm at the Sears Tower," right? Or you go into the lobby, you're in the Sears Tower. Then when you go up and go to the observation deck, someone calls you and says, "Where are you?" "I'm at the Sears Tower." You're in the same place. But when you go up towards the top, you see the whole city. And this is where this series is essentially going of, yes, there are things on the ground for us to participate in, like feeding ourselves and going to bed and buying things to help our health. That is all absolutely fair game. You're still at the Sears Tower. But the vantage point of that, once you start seeing yourself as a whole and functioning from that place and asking those questions, the nitty gritty of what you put in your mouth or for your products or all of those smaller decisions are much easier to make. So this is not a way to get out of doing things. It's just the way to say, how can I make that as easy as possible? Because if you've been at this a while, you know, you've probably efforted a lot and you're like, yes, I'm going to eat perfectly. And then you fall off the wagon and, oh, I'm going to get this stuff. Oh, and I forgot to do it, right? That experience is lackluster because we're not functioning at the highest capacity of who we are, wherever that is available to us at that point, knowing that the goalposts will shift from what's available to us. But this is where we are at our highest point. Once we get really in touch with what that is, the you that is calm, aligned, moving easily and effortlessly towards your health with an understanding of what's important to you, what your values are, being in touch with yourself. The person that's doing that, it's natural for them to make healthy food choices because they care and value themselves. It is natural for them to begin to observe maybe not so nice thoughts that pop up into their head about themselves and to lovingly say, I will choose, out of caring for myself, a better thing to reinforce in my own brain, right? That is who you are at that level. So all of those actions are determined by that. When we start with the actions and try to force ourselves there, it can be painful, it can be frustrating, and more often than not, we end up sitting there going, why am I still stuck where I am? All right, so with that super long intro, this is why I'm finding this so gratifying, and why I'm enjoying doing this so much is because of all the years that we've been talking about going to the root cause and going to the most fundamental aspect of healing, I think we are just now fully recognizing where the most high leverage points are. And I will say that journey has been super fun, and I'm really excited for where it's going to go because this thing has roots on it, and I am just so excited to dig even more into it. All right, so before we go too much further on that, we're going to consider doing a little body love. Good. So with this part of the cycle, as we're finishing up phase 3 and popping into phase 4. Phase 4 is all about turning inwards again. Okay, so turning inwards is beginning to do a little reevaluation. And with that, I think that people begin to automatically go to everything that is still not where they want it to be, and bringing in more of a love for yourself, and even just working in the physical body is a powerful portion of that, because then as we change the relationship with our bodies, the impulse, the thoughts that we have around it and what we're driven by begin to shift. And again, we already talked about the fact that beating yourself up in order to motivate yourself is not the only option available. So if you've been doing that for a while and it's not working, consider the fact that maybe loving on yourself can actually help get you there. And wouldn't that be handy? You know what I'm saying? So with that in mind, what's the deal with phase 4? Phase 4 is now we're turning back around and we're finishing with more of an inward focus. So phase 1, inward, we're looking at the bigger picture, we're pulling everything together. Phase 2, we're seeing out of where we're going, what are the most high leverage actions that we can take from with that energy that we have at phase 2 to catapult ourselves to where we want to go. Phase 3 was setting up, still outwardly focused, action oriented, but setting up for yourself these systems and processes in place that make it as easy as possible to stick with the success so that you're kind of on the upward spiral, success begetting success, and continuing to improve and continuing to move forward in a way that feels really good to you. So phase 4 now, there's this beautiful balance where it's 50-50. Now we're coming back inwards, and a lot of us feel that in phase 4 because we're a little bit like we're more tired. Sometimes, especially with the symptoms, people feel like depression, anxiety, irritability, kind of all the PMS stuff, that the impulse from the body is always going to be to downregulate more and go inwards, but when we have imbalances that already skew us towards that way, it tends to be exaggerated. That doesn't mean that it has to stay that way, but it doesn't have to feel as severe either, right? So it's a quieting down and getting really internally clear with yourself. Now, this reassessment thing, the reassessment comes in, you looked at the bigger picture in phase 1, then you set your sights on where you're going, so you took action with that and you initiated something, right? Whether it was a new way of eating, a new way of moving, a new way of approaching sleep, a new way of, supplements, whatever it is. Then you follow that through. In phase 4, what's super duper valuable is that we get to assess how the newness fits into this pre-existing structure of our life and what is already going on. Because as you've probably noticed, you start a super intense diet, you're like, this time I stick to it. And then you get closer to your period, you kind of get fatigued, and then you're like, no, that cookie sounds good. You eat the cookie, you say, oh my gosh, I messed up a diet again. This isn't even worth it. I always mess up everything. And then down you go and you're out, right? And this is not, I don't even have to have a show of hands here. This is just like the standard story, right? Literally the diet industry wouldn't exist if this didn't happen. So, and I'm not even talking about diets. I'm just talking about like, I want to eat more vegetables. But this is essentially the same kind of loop that people go on. And so phase 4 is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful antidote to this process where we get to say, out of this very clear understanding of where I'm going, setting myself up for success for it, now what does balance look like for me? Is me having a cookie, the one that I pick, the quality and the ingredients and whatever, could this be a component, however big or small you want to make it, in my eating for the long term? Because this is a question of sustainability. What does it look like to bring in some sort of balance that you feel that way about it? Because with the balance, what happens is oftentimes we're trying to go too extreme. It's not sustainable. And then we make it mean that it's perfection or bust. And then we knock ourselves off the actual path that could have been very beneficial for us. And so then it comes down to, how do I toe that line in a way that marries what I want, and when I want it, with where I'm actually going in the bigger picture. Sometimes those two things are competing, like I want the cookie now, but I want to eat healthy. Well, what does the role of a cookie actually do, right? Now, the other aspect to this is that it's not always one-to-one. It's not always figure out how to merge, allowing yourself to have a treat with a healthier way of eating, because we can actually step back and even ask one layer deeper into ourselves and say, what does the cookie represent? Sometimes it's just craving. That's why you focus on, picking a better cookie or whatever it is, or whatever you decide on the frequency and the timing and the quality and whatever. Sometimes, though, it becomes, in this moment, I'm reaching for the cookie because I'm lonely and I really don't, at this time, I'm down regulating, I want to go inwards, and I'm beginning to feel that impulse from myself of like, I don't feel very supported in my life. I don't feel like I have, people who really see me in this way on a regular basis. That then becomes so much more powerful, because we can beat ourselves up about the cookie till the cows come home. But if you don't address the fact that you're lonely, right, there's that acronym, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So sometimes I run through that one in my head when I have something like that comes up, like I gotta have this. Then I check in. What is actually going on? And how can I, and then more importantly, once you identify, is how can I give myself that? So if it's loneliness is the cookie, how do you get connection? What is your connection? Some people are like, I have horses. I go, spend time with them, or my dog. Sometimes it's, I feel really connected with my children. I'm going to put aside everything else and go spend time with them. Maybe it's, talking with your partner and saying, I really am feeling this way. Could we set aside time to have some quality, just beingness together, or calling a friend, or joining a Facebook group of like-minded people, whatever it is that you got, right? Asking the question identifies what you're actually going after. And then in terms of how you give yourself that, the possibilities are very diverse, and it's totally up to you how you feel best getting that, right? And so this is where phase 4, with the brain's ability and its inclination now to say, how do I look at this topic and not a black and white thing? How can I see the intricacies of who I am and what life is and all these moving parts of it? And how do I tweak it so that I'm happy with it now? Sometimes what happens is that you look around in that time and say, oh, wow, I still want to have this component in my life. That is still my goal. I'm realizing that now, this other issue or this other event came in. Now the situation's a little bit different. Maybe I need to shift the proportion of time or effort that I spend on something. Now I have more information to work with, and I know that because I'm making the conscious decision, once this new scenario or problem or whatever you had works itself out, I will go back to that. This isn't I do random stuff and maybe I'll forget about it. This is where intentionality becomes absolutely the driving key for this, because if you intentionally choose to change what you're doing, you can intentionally choose to change it back at a later point. It doesn't have to mean anything. There have been times where, let's keep going on with the food. Generally speaking, Megan and I eat very healthfully, it's what you'd expect from people that talk about what we talk about. Now, there have been times where our lives have been so spun upside down and in the air that we have gone to, I'm going to make the best choices I can. And also, if that looks like eating salsa with some corn chips, standing up at the counter just so I get something into my body, that's going to be okay. And that's where cycle after cycle, because you do a reevaluation, it never gets too far away from you, right? So the eating whatever at the counter just because it's time to eat and you didn't make anything else, or you went shopping, right? That just can happen. but we also don't need to make it mean, oh, it's a year and a half later and I'm like, oh boy, maybe I should go back to that, right? It's the reminder is always there because time will go, and so the cycle is always going, whether you're following the moon or your own, it's always going to keep beating that time forward. And with the like beating the drum, not beating like angry. It's always going to keep launching us, and then the next cycle we could say, is that still true, or do I need to make some better choices? So this reevaluation stage where you really get to be very compassionate with yourself and really begin to observe where you are and receive feedback from yourself and say, I don't need to be one thing all the time or do something all the time. It really feels like the biggest breath of fresh air you've ever had. Instead of being something static, you get to just be the dynamic being that you are, calling the shots however you want to call them. And isn't that freaking cool? Right, so that is the overall goal for phase 4. And so let's talk about body love today, because I think that as that happens, there's a lot of interplay between how we feel about ourselves and what is going on. So with the approaching your body, this whole conversation that we've just been having is about having grace for yourself, right? And really acknowledging what's going on for you and saying, what is the most loving version of this that is available to me right now? And with your body, that's another opportunity to apply that, because the brain is already looking for possibilities here. How are all the different chess pieces and puzzle pieces able to be fit together at this point in time? With our body, then, we can really begin to show it love so that our own brains and our own bodies are feeling that higher perspective with us. This isn't, I hate my body, therefore I'm punishing it. And when I'm punishing it, there's no room for kind of wiggling around. There's no wiggle room. There's no alternatives. Everything's static. Everything's rules. Everything has to be the way that it is. When we then change the conversation and say, I really love and appreciate myself for who I am, when you really love and appreciate someone, like a friend or a partner, you don't sit around beating up on their body, right? You just don't do those things because you would never treat someone else you love like that. So this conversation then becomes, how can we take the time to really change our own relationship with ourselves? And the body, for a lot of us, is a big area of that. What's cool about that is that once you kind of love on your body enough and you begin to realize that it's all just a process that is going to ebb and flow over time and things will constantly be changing, then you get to free up your mind for other more kind of gratifying, high yield things, because at the end of the day, we will all age. No matter how perfect your body looks now, eventually it's going to get older, you know, if we're all lucky enough to live. So with that, the looks, one way or another, will become different than, you know, the ideal that we have for ourselves. And therefore, it frees us up to not devote so much mental space to that, especially in a way that is based off of judgment, of punishment, of thinking poorly about ourselves, and therefore needing to, quote, meet the goals to prove to ourselves that we're worthy of that. Okay, so that's why we're going to end up with body love, right? There's going to be 2 options of things that I bring up. So there's going to be doing a body love meditation, or there's going to be a I am list. Okay, so whether you want to kind of do a meditative thing or journal, those are going to be your options. Don't forget, by the way, the companion guide is still available. It's zestyginger.com/flow, and the workbook has a bunch of stuff in it. But so for the meditation, this is where you are going to do a body scan. So you can either start at the top of your head and go down your body towards your toes, or you start at your toes and move up your body to your head, and you're essentially breathing. And the focus of that meditative state is as you go body part by body part, you are saying what you appreciate about it or expressing appreciation for it, right? So if you're like, well, I think I have thunder thighs, I don't feel like saying I appreciate my thighs. There's a difference in saying, I appreciate that my legs took me up that hike on the mountain that I went with my partner. That was where we got engaged, right? Or something like that. I don't know. I'm just making things up for you. But in any way, that is a different way. We're not lying to ourselves like, I love my thighs. I mean, if you love your thighs, great. And if you're not at that place, cool, that's totally fine, where it's not that we're trying to tell ourselves a story that our own brain doesn't believe, but there is a way to express appreciation that is true and authentic for us, but it's the focus on that. It's a different way of getting your brain to bring up the things that are actually true for us and to acknowledge those. So for that, this is where we can really say, I'm going to move up my body and just express whatever gratitude I do have. And sometimes neutrality is also fine. Thank you, I have thighs, period. I mean, you probably would like to have thighs, right? Like, and you'd like to have legs, or you'd like to have a stomach. This is whatever it is, or maybe you don't like your batwing arms or whatever the heck people make up for that kind of thing. But right, you just can appreciate, I have arms. They don't have to be good, they don't have to be bad. If that's where you are, neutrality is really powerful. And when you add gratitude to that, gratitude is one of the most powerful places to be in, so that our brain opens up and is starting to look at the good and focusing on that and directing in that direction rather than the bad, right? Thank you, I have thighs. Period. Then you go on to the next thing. And then if there are sticking points that come up, just note them, because those are opportunities for, as you go cycle by cycle and you're repeating this, I would recommend going back to listen to these podcast episodes a couple times as you go through the process. But note that, because as you shift, the ideas that you have around it that bring resolution and make you feel good about things, you'll come up with other things that address that, or you'll realize at some point, like, hey, that actually just ceased to be a problem. I didn't resolve my issues with my cellulite. I just changed enough that stopped being a concern, right? So we don't necessarily always have to solve the problem. Sometimes that does come up and we're like, oh, here's, on this day, I really jive with it. Like, I can see what I would do for it. I'm going to, XYZ, you fill in the blank. And sometimes it's just one of those where when you look back, you're like, wow, that just isn't even in my view, right? We can be worried about the gum on the sidewalk when we're next to the Sears Tower, but when you're up on the observation deck, you don't care about that gum. It's not bothering you. You're not going to step in it. You're nowhere near it. So it's the same thing here, where sometimes, it's nice to go back and say, at one point I acknowledge this, and look how much I've changed, that this evidence is here to say, just not even a thing anymore. Just not on my radar. And that's super cool. All right, so that's the meditation. The list. This is one of our favorite exercises to do, especially when you're feeling bad about yourself. The I am exercise is listing 100 things that you are proud to be. Okay? And this is who you are being or have been. Okay? 100 things. It's a lot. And that is by design. So the 100 things, you have to get creative. This isn't like 5 things you like about yourself. right? You have to really actually begin to think of things big and small about who you are that you appreciate or are proud about. So, similar type of vibe as the meditation, but it also gets to kind of a more complete look as well. And for those people who lean more towards journaling, I think many of us, and I'm including myself in this, things have to make sense. And so when I put 100 things on a piece of paper, it helps give my brain fuel when it starts, doing all the chit chat. Now I have 100 things that it knows and is aware of that it uses for ammo instead of 100 bad things that I've been focusing on since I was a teen. Right? So this is who you are, 100 things. So this can be, it doesn't just have to be about your body, though I would include things about your body because, like I said, there's a component of coming to love our physicality that is very freeing and a part of the stuff that will drive us to do things like be a certain way, act a certain way, lash out at people in a certain way. Because if we are truly at the place where it's like, I don't even like what I see in the mirror, we will express that to others, and sometimes in ways that we don't want to be doing that. So this is a huge one, and those are shackles to give yourself the gift of taking off for sure. So yeah, 100 things that you are proud of. And so for 100, if you do all 100 for your body, great. If 100 is kind of a lot though, so if you don't have enough of that for your body, you can put other things too. Play with it. Obviously, all of these are completely malleable to you by design. That's the whole reason I put this together the way that I did. All right, my loves, thank you so much for joining me. I really hope that you find that activity to be fun and enjoyable and to really allow yourself to experience what it feels like to just love on yourself and give a little break, take a little rest from being so damn hard on yourself all the time. I think we all need this. All right, lots of love. We'll see you for the Ultimate Health Blueprint series. So excited for that as well. But in the meantime, we're going to finish out phase 4 over the next week or so. And that'll be it for our series. Thanks so much for the shares that you have done and the friends that you told about it. It's been really fun to meet new people this way. All right, sending you lots of love. Talk soon.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.